There's something unsettling happening around you, Aquarius, and it's not because you're doing more. It's because you're doing less and somehow everything has shifted. People don't say it out loud, but you feel it the moment you walk into a room. Conversations soften. Eyes linger. Energy recalibrates without permission. This isn't a glow up. This isn't reinvention. This is what happens when you stop explaining who you are and let your presence speak instead. You didn't become colder. You became clearer. And clarity has weight. If you've noticed people treating you differently lately without knowing why, leave a letter 1FA90 in the comments. No explanation needed. Because what's unfolding here isn't something you announce. It's something people feel right before they realize they can't relate to you the same way anymore. And once that shift begins, there's no going back to the version of you they were comfortable with. There's a quiet reason why this shift feels unsettling to others. And if you're honest with yourself, it surprised you too. Not because you planned it, but because it arrived the moment you stopped trying to arrive anywhere. You didn't wake up one morning deciding to change. You simply grew tired of carrying what was never yours to hold. The expectations, the emotional noise, the need to be understood by everyone in the room. And without announcing it, you set something down. That's when the air around you began to respond. You might have noticed it in subtle ways. People pause before speaking to you now. They measure their words. Some lean in closer, curious. Others pull back, unsure, not because you became distant, but because you're no longer leaking energy in all directions. You're contained. And containment is powerful. There's something deeply Aquarian about this moment. When your inner world aligns so cleanly that your outer presence doesn't need decoration. No performance. No over-explaining. Just a steady frequency that fills the space without effort. That's what unsettles people. They can't read you the way they used to. And what they can't read, they can't control. Have you felt that slight hesitation in others lately, as if they're recalibrating around you, trying to understand which version of you just walked in? This isn't dominance. It's coherence. When your thoughts stop arguing with your intuition, your body speaks before your mouth ever does. And the room listens. Some people will interpret this as coldness. Let them. Coldness is what it feels like to someone who no longer has access. What they're really sensing is your boundaries settling into place, not as walls, but as gravity. And gravity doesn't chase, it doesn't persuade, it simply is. You might feel moments of loneliness brushing up against this shift. That's normal. Anytime you step out of an old energetic contract, the silence can feel louder at first. But listen closely, that silence isn't emptiness, it's space. Space for deeper conversations. Space for people who don't need you to shrink or soften your truth. Space for a life that meets you where you are now, not where you used to be. Here's something most people won't tell you. This phase isn't about becoming more visible. It's about becoming more selective. And that's why everything feels sharper, clearer, more intentional. So let me ask you something gently. Are you willing to let people misunderstand you for a while so you don't have to misunderstand yourself ever again? Because this version of you, the one that doesn't announce, doesn't chase, doesn't explain, isn't temporary. It's the beginning of a different relationship with your own energy. And once that relationship stabilizes, the world around you has no choice but to respond differently. Stay here with me. There's more unfolding beneath the surface, and you're just starting to feel the light reach it. There's something else happening now, a little quieter, a little more intimate. It's not about who you are becoming. It's about who people think you still are. They're speaking to a memory, responding to an old snapshot. A version of you that once made sense inside their expectations. You can feel it when they talk to you, can't you? The way their tone doesn't quite match your energy anymore. The way their assumptions arrive before their questions. As if they're still reaching for the person who used to fill in the blanks for them. And for a moment, that can feel disorienting. Not painful. Just oddly distant. Because you didn't disappear. You didn't harden. You didn't shut your heart down. You simply stopped translating yourself into something easier to digest. There was a time when you explained your choices in advance. Softened your edges so no one would feel uncomfortable. You learned how to read the room and adjust yourself accordingly. That wasn't weakness. That was intelligence. That was survival. But something shifted when you realized how much energy it took to keep being recognizable to everyone else. Now, when people look at you, the picture doesn't load properly. Their mind hesitates. Their emotional shortcuts stop working. And that pause, that tiny, awkward silence isn't rejection, it's recalibration. They're trying to place you back into a role that no longer exists. And you're standing there quietly, not correcting them, not performing. Just breathing. Just present. Have you noticed how freeing it feels to let people misunderstand you a little, instead of betraying yourself to stay familiar? There's a subtle strength in that, a very Aquarian kind of strength. Detached but not cold. Clear but not closed. Some people will retreat when they can't predict you anymore. Others will become curious. A few will feel unsettled without knowing why. That's not your responsibility to manage. Because this phase isn't about being liked, it's about being aligned. When you stop offering constant access to your inner world, your energy reorganizes itself. You speak less but land deeper. You listen more but absorb less that doesn't belong to you. And suddenly, conversations feel different. Connections shift. The ones built on convenience loosen their grip. The ones built on respect begin to reveal themselves. Let me ask you something softly. Who benefits when you stay easy to read, easy to predict, easy to explain? And who do you become when you no longer volunteer that labor? There's a quiet dignity growing in you now. Not loud enough to announce itself, but steady enough to change how people approach you. This is where discernment begins to replace habit, where you choose presence over approval, where you allow others to catch up or fall away without chasing either outcome. Stay with this feeling. There's more clarity forming underneath it. And as the old image fades, something truer is coming into focus. There's a reason some chapters of your life felt quiet on the outside, not empty, just misunderstood. People mistook your stillness for hesitation, your distance for disengagement, your refusal to rush for a lack of ambition. But you know what was really happening during those years. You were watching, listening beyond words, tracing patterns most people are too busy to notice. You saw how power moves without announcing itself, how intentions often hide behind charm, how systems reward noise more than truth. And instead of competing for attention, you chose to understand the terrain. That choice cost you recognition. It delayed applause. It placed you in rooms where others underestimated you. But it also gave you something rare: perspective. While others were trying to be seen, you were learning where not to stand. While they chased approval, you were mapping cause and effect inside people's behavior. That wasn't weakness. That was long vision. There's a certain loneliness that comes with that kind of awareness. Because when you see how things really work, small talk loses its appeal. Performative confidence feels hollow, and rules start to look optional rather than absolute. You didn't rebel loudly. You didn't submit quietly either. You simply didn't internalize structures that never honored your truth. And that confused people. They expected reaction. You offered observation. They expected urgency. You brought patience. Have you ever noticed how often clarity is mistaken for passivity? How discernment gets labeled as detachment by those who move on impulse? You were building an inner compass while the world was chasing shortcuts. That's why now, when situations unfold, you're rarely surprised. You've already seen the trajectory. You've already felt the undercurrent before the wave arrives. This is the kind of intelligence that doesn't announce itself. It reveals itself over time. And it comes with responsibility. Because once you understand systems, you can no longer pretend you don't see where they fail. You can't unknow what you've learned about human behavior, about manipulation, about cycles repeating themselves. So you become selective, not guarded, intentional. You choose where to place your energy because you know what it costs to rebuild it. Let me ask you something gently. How different would your life look if you honored your observational nature as a strength instead of trying to outgrow it? There is wisdom in those quiet years you thought didn't count. There is power in having waited, not out of fear, but out of understanding. You weren't late. You were early in seeing the truth. And now, as things begin to align in subtler ways, that deep knowing you cultivated starts to guide you without effort. Stay present with this awareness. There's a new kind of confidence forming, not loud, not defensive, grounded, unshakable. And it's preparing you for what comes next with far more grace than force ever could. At some point, something softened inside you, not collapsed, softened. It happened quietly, no argument, no dramatic goodbye. You simply stopped reaching for words every time someone expected an explanation, not because you were tired, not because you were hurt, but because you finally understood something essential. Your existence does not require permission. There was a time when silence felt uncomfortable to you, as if leaving a sentence unfinished meant you were failing the moment, as if clarity was something you owed. Now silence feels different. It feels intentional, grounded, almost protective. You're not withholding information. You're conserving energy. When you pause before responding, when you let a message sit unanswered a little longer, when you choose not to justify a decision that already feels right in your body, you're not closing off. You're defining the edge of yourself. And boundaries don't shout, they don't threaten. They don't need explanations. They simply exist. Some people feel that immediately. They sense a door that used to be open is now gently closed. Not locked. Just no longer automatic. That can unsettle them. Because access has a way of being mistaken for entitlement. And when access changes, people are forced to confront how they were relating to you in the first place. You might notice fewer questions now, or more cautious ones. You might notice conversations staying closer to the surface until trust is earned again. That's not distance. That's discernment. There's a maturity in realizing that not everyone deserves the full story. That not every moment needs to be shared in real time. That privacy is not secrecy, it's respect for your own inner process. Let me ask you something gently. When you stopped explaining yourself, what did you gain back? Time, clarity, a steadier nervous system. Your silence started doing work words never could. It filtered connections. It revealed intentions. It created space for people to meet you where you actually are instead of where they felt most comfortable with you being. And in that space, something else began to grow. A deeper self-trust. You no longer rush to fill gaps. You allow moments to breathe. You let others sit with their reactions instead of rushing to manage them. That is not coldness. That is emotional sovereignty. Aquarius energy has always known how to stand slightly apart from the crowd. Not above. Not below. Just far enough away to see clearly. Now that distance feels less like isolation and more like alignment. You're discovering that peace doesn't come from being understood by everyone. It comes from not betraying yourself to be understood at all. Stay with this quiet strength for a moment. Notice how it steadies your voice, your choices, your sense of self. There's something else unfolding beneath this boundary. Something that changes how people approach you and how you approach the world. And as this calm continues to deepen, you may find that what's coming next requires exactly this level of stillness to receive it. There's a subtle moment you might recognize. It arrives without warning. A familiar name lights up your screen. Not urgent, not emotional, just present. A simple checking in. A polite reach across time. It's interesting how energy calls things back when it changes. These faces aren't returning with apologies or explanations. They don't need to. They're responding to something quieter. Something they feel but can't quite name. You're not chasing anymore. You're not filling empty spaces. You're not proving your worth through availability. And that shift creates a gravity. People who once moved past you without noticing now pause. Not because they suddenly see the past differently, but because the present feels unfamiliar. There's a part of you that understands this without judgment. You don't feel victorious. You don't feel resentful. You feel observant. You notice how their tone carries curiosity now. How the conversation starts carefully, as if they're unsure which version of you they're speaking to. And you let that uncertainty exist, because you've learned something important. Not every reconnection is an invitation. Sometimes it's simply information. Information about how your growth registers in the world. You don't rush to open doors anymore, not out of fear, out of respect for your own rhythm. You know how much it took to arrive here. The quiet recalibrations. The boundaries you honored when no one was watching. The inner work that didn't announce itself. So when someone from another chapter reaches back, you pause. You feel your body before you answer. You check whether the energy aligns, not whether the history does. That's a different kind of wisdom. Have you noticed how peace changes your response time? How you no longer feel obligated to meet nostalgia halfway? You're not withholding connection. You're allowing it to earn its place. Some of these returning faces will drift away again. Not because you pushed them out, but because the dynamic they relied on no longer exists. Others may surprise you. They'll show up differently, more grounded, more present. You don't decide that immediately. You let time reveal it. This is one of the quieter powers of Aquarius energy. The ability to observe without attachment, to remain open without being porous. You understand now that not everything that circles back is meant to stay. Some things return only to show you how far you've come. And there's a tenderness in that realization. A soft gratitude for the version of you that once waited, that once hoped, that once overgave. You don't judge that version, you honor it. Because it carried you to a place where choice feels clean. Where connection is no longer reactive. Where your presence is an offering, not an obligation. So you move gently with these moments. You don't rush conclusions. You don't shut anything down. You simply stand where you are now and let others approach from there. There's something quietly empowering about that stance. It changes the way people meet you. It changes the way you meet yourself. And as this pattern continues to unfold, you may notice another shift coming. One that asks even more clarity from you. Not about who returns, but about who you allow to remain. Stay with that awareness. There's a deeper alignment forming beneath it. There's a moment when something fundamental settles inside you. It doesn't feel dramatic. It feels final, not in a harsh way, in a grounded one. You realize you're no longer standing in rooms hoping someone will notice you. You're standing there because you chose to be there. And if no one meets you where you are, you don't shrink to fit the space. You leave. That awareness changes how you move through the world. You stop measuring your worth through shared memories, through emotional intensity, through promises spoken in moments that never became patterns. You start paying attention to what stays consistent when things get quiet. Who shows up without being reminded? Who respects your time without negotiation? Who honors your boundaries even when it costs them convenience? This isn't bitterness. It's clarity. You don't resent the past. You simply don't let it decide your future. There's a softness in how you hold this now. You're not testing people. You're not keeping score. You're listening to the body first. To the subtle tension or ease that tells you whether something aligns. Have you noticed how peaceful it feels to no longer audition for connection? You're not waiting for an invitation anymore. You're curating your environment with intention, choosing relationships that feel reciprocal instead of familiar. And because of that, your energy reads differently. You don't lean forward. You don't chase momentum. You remain centered. That steadiness can be confusing to those who are used to being pursued. They may interpret your neutrality as distance, your discernment as detachment. But you know the truth. You're not cold. You're accurate. You see what's there without embellishment. You accept what is offered without projecting what could be. That precision is a form of respect. For yourself. For others. Because you're no longer asking someone to become something they've never been. And you're no longer volunteering to be less than who you are. Let me ask you something quietly. If you stopped waiting to be chosen years ago, how many doors would you have closed sooner, and which ones might you have walked through with more confidence? There's courage in this phase that often goes unnoticed. The courage to walk away without anger, to choose solitude over misalignment, to let things end without needing a villain. Aquarius energy understands this deeply. Freedom is not found in endless options. It's found in precise alignment. You don't chase connection. You respond to resonance. And as you continue to live from this place, your life begins to organize itself differently. Fewer people, clearer bonds, more space to think, create, breathe. You may notice that your standards aren't higher. They're simply cleaner. You're not asking for perfection. You're asking for truth in action. This is what it looks like when you choose yourself without hostility. When you let go of the need to be selected and begin selecting your life with intention. Stay with this steadiness. There's a deeper calm growing from it. And soon, it will change not just who you allow in, but how you show up everywhere else. There's something subtle that happens when you finally settle into yourself. It's not confidence the loud kind. It's not certainty that needs agreement. It's stability. And stability has a way of making some people uneasy. You may not notice it at first. It shows up in small shifts. A comment that feels slightly edged. A silence that lingers longer than before. A change in how someone looks at you when you don't react the way they expected. Because when you become steady, you become reflective. Not intentionally, not aggressively. You simply mirror back what's already there. Your calm highlights their urgency. Your patience exposes their restlessness. Your clarity quietly reveals the questions they've been avoiding. And that contrast can be uncomfortable. Some people feel inspired by it. They lean in. They listen more closely. They wonder how you found that balance. Others begin to measure themselves against you. Not out of malice. Out of uncertainty. And then there are those who feel disturbed, without knowing why. Because your grounded presence asks a question they are not ready to answer. What happens if I stop running? What do I have to face? You're not trying to provoke anything. You're not making a statement. You're simply not shaken anymore. That's the part that surprises them. You don't rush to defend your choices. You don't explain your piece. You don't absorb reactions that don't belong to you. You let them pass through the room and leave. Have you noticed how powerful it feels to remain centered while the world reacts around you? This is not detachment, it's regulation. You've learned how to stay with yourself in moments that once pulled you outward. You don't borrow other people's emotions. You don't internalize their projections. That kind of stability is rare, and rarity often gets misunderstood. Some will test it. They may push gently, then harder. They may try to pull you back into old dynamics, old rhythms, old roles. But you don't move. Not because you're rigid, because you're rooted. Aquarius energy, at its most evolved, understands this truth. Freedom is not chaos, it's inner order. You've organized your inner world enough that external noise no longer rearranges you. That's why reactions don't hook you anymore. Praise doesn't inflate you. Discomfort doesn't destabilize you. You remain present, attentive, clear. Let me ask you something softly. What changes when you stop needing others to be comfortable with your calm? You start living from alignment instead of reaction. You respond instead of absorb. You choose instead of defend. And in doing so, you offer something quietly revolutionary to the world. A nervous system that is not contagious. A presence that does not escalate. A way of being that invites reflection rather than conflict. Not everyone will appreciate that, and that's okay. Your role is not to soothe the discomfort your growth creates in others. Your role is to remain honest with the ground you stand on. As you continue to hold this steadiness, you may notice fewer emotional spikes around you. Fewer dramatic entanglements. More space. That space is not emptiness. It's clarity preparing the way forward. Stay with this calm. It's doing more work than you realize. And it's quietly shaping what comes next in ways that don't need to announce themselves yet. There is a quiet moment that arrives after everything settles. Not loud. Not dramatic. It feels like standing alone in a wide room after the door has closed. No one watching. No one asking. Just you finally breathing at your natural size. This is where I notice you now. You did not reinvent yourself. You did not perform a transformation. You simply stopped shrinking when the room felt uncomfortable. And that choice alone changed the temperature around you. Your energy feels different here. Not sharp, not defensive, just present. Grounded in a way that does not need validation. There is something deeply unsettling to others about a person who no longer explains their existence. And something deeply peaceful about being that person. You are not louder. You are not trying to be impressive. Yet people feel you before you speak. They register you before they understand why. Your silence carries weight now. Have you noticed how your pauses last longer and no longer feel empty? This version of you does not rush to fill space. You allow moments to hang. You allow conversations to unfold without steering them. That calm confidence does something powerful. It removes the option to overlook you. Aquarius energy, at its highest expression, is not rebellious for attention. It is sovereign through clarity, detached but deeply humane, independent without being cold. You are standing in that frequency now. People may not compliment you the way they used to. Some may not approach you as easily. That is not rejection. That is recognition. They feel your self-containment, and they adjust accordingly. You are no longer editing yourself for comfort. You let your thoughts land where they land. You let your truth exist without footnotes. Does it surprise you how little effort this takes once you stop resisting it? There is an honesty in your posture now, an emotional spine that does not bend for approval. And paradoxically, that is what draws attention without asking for it. This presence cannot be ignored because it does not chase being seen. It is complete before the audience arrives. You are not trying to prove that you are whole. You are allowing yourself to be whole in real time. In the room, in the relationship, in the silence between words. That is the shift. And here is something rarely said out loud. People do not ignore what they cannot control. They ignore what still seeks permission. You no longer do. So they look twice. They listen longer. They sense that you are no longer available for projection. How does it feel to realize that nothing about you needs correction anymore? This is not arrogance. It is integration. A calm agreement with yourself. You are not stepping forward. You are standing fully where you already are. And that stance changes everything around you. Stay here a little longer. Let this version breathe. Because once you allow yourself to exist at this frequency, the world adjusts on its own. And that is when being unseen is no longer possible. All right, stay with me here. Not because you need another message, but because this moment deserves to be felt all the way through. If you are still listening, Aquarius, it tells me something important. It tells me you recognized yourself somewhere along this journey. Not the version the world labels. Not the one that learned to adapt. But the one that has always known who you are, quietly, patiently beneath the noise. There is a gentle certainty around you now. You may not have named it yet, but it is there, like a steady current under calm water. And here is the part that still surprises people. You did not arrive here by force. You arrived by honesty, by choosing alignment over approval, by trusting your inner timing when others rushed you to explain yourself. That is Aquarius wisdom. Not loud, not obvious, but undeniable. Take a breath with me for a second. Let it land. If this message found you at the right time, I invite you to say it out loud in the comments. Not for me. For someone else who might be listening quietly, wondering if they are alone in this shift. This space is becoming a meeting point for awakened Aquarians, thinkers, healers, observers, people who feel deeply even when they do not show it. And if you want to stay connected to this frequency, to messages that do not rush you, that do not scare you into action, but gently remind you of who you already are, then you already know what to do. Subscribe, not as a habit, as a choice to walk this path consciously. The journey does not end here. In fact, it is just opening into a new layer. There are messages still forming, clarity still arriving, and a deeper understanding of your role in this season of your life. Before you go, I want to leave you with this blessing. May you trust your inner stillness even when the world misunderstands it. May you honor your vision even when it unfolds slowly. May you remember that your presence alone shifts rooms, timelines, and hearts. And most of all, may you never again doubt the quiet power of being exactly who you are. The next message is already on its way. Until then, stay curious, stay grounded, and trust yourself.